They say love is blind, but sometimes it's just waiting for the right moment to open its eyes. Derek thought he was the king of the world. He thought his wife, Madeline, was just an anchor dragging him down a plain, quiet woman in a thrift store dress who didn't fit into his glittering world of high finance and private galas. He spent the entire night belittling her, mocking her, and finally, humiliating her in front of the people he wanted to impress the most. He thought he had the upper hand. He was wrong. He didn't know who she really was. But when that roaring engine cut through the silence and a $65 million Bombardier Global 7500 touched down on the tarmac, Derek was about to learn the hardest lesson of his life. Watch closely, because this isn't just a breakup, it's a reckoning. The invitation was printed on heavy cream cardstock with gold leaf edges, the kind that whispered money before you even read the text. The Vanderwall Aviation Gala. Teterboro Private Hangar. Black tie. For Derek Calloway, this card wasn't just an invitation. It was a skeleton key. It was access to the inner circle of the East Coast's most elite financial sector, a room filled with men who signed checks with more zeros than Derek had in his retirement fund. He had spent 6 years, clawing his way up from a junior analyst position to a mid-level director at Stratton Oakley, and tonight was his chance to bridge the gap to partner. He stood in front of the floor-to-length mirror in their master bedroom, adjusting the cuffs of his rented tuxedo. It was a designer label, but it didn't fit him quite right in the shoulders, a fact that was making him sweat before they had even left the house. "Madeline?" he barked, his eyes never leaving his own reflection. "We are leaving in 4 minutes. If you aren't downstairs, I'm leaving you here." From the en-suite bathroom, Madeline emerged. She was 32, though tonight she looked younger, perhaps due to the lack of makeup. She had soft features, warm hazel eyes, and hair the color of roasted chestnuts that she had pulled back into a simple, severe bun. She wasn't wearing diamonds. She wasn't wearing silk. She was wearing a navy blue dress that fell to her ankles, made of a sensible cotton blend. It fit her well, accentuating a waist she rarely showed off, but it lacked the shimmer and aggressive glamour of the gowns that would be at the gala. Derek turned, and his face fell. It wasn't just disappointment, it was disdain. Is that the dress you bought from the consignment shop on 4th Street? He asked, his voice dripping with incredulity. Madeline smoothed the fabric over her hips, her hands trembling slightly. "It's vintage, Derek. It's a Halston. I found it for $40, but the stitching is incredible. I thought the color." "You thought wrong," Derek cut in, walking over to her and gripping her upper arm, turning her toward the mirror. "Look at us, Maddie. Look at the difference. I am wearing a tuxedo. I look like I belong in the room with Preston Vanderwall. You look like you're there to serve the hors d'oeuvres." Madeline pulled her arm away gently. "It's a black tie event, Derek. This is formal. It's elegant. Not everything has to sparkle to be valuable. In my world, it does," Derek hissed. He ran a hand through his gelled blonde hair, pacing the room. "God, I knew this was a mistake. I should have brought Chloe. She knows how to dress for these things. She knows the game." The mention of Chloe, his work wife and ambitious junior associate, stung. But Madeline had grown used to the poison in Derek's tone over the last 2 years. Since his promotion, the man she had married, the funny, ambitious but kind man, who loved her homemade pasta and quiet nights in, had been replaced by this anxious, status-obsessed stranger. "I can stay home," Madeline said quietly. "If you're that ashamed of me." Derek stopped pacing. He looked at her, calculating. He needed a wife on his arm to look stable, to look like a family man. Preston Vanderwall was notoriously traditional. Showing up alone would raise questions. Showing up with a mistress type like Chloe might send the wrong message. He needed Madeline, but he resented needing her. "No," he sighed, grabbing his car keys. "It's too late to change plans. Just try to stand in the back. Don't laugh that loud laugh of yours. And for God's sake, don't talk about your Etsy hobbies or whatever it is you do all day. Tell them you're into philanthropy. Just keep it vague." "I don't do Etsy hobbies, Derek," she said, her voice steady but low. I manage the portfolio. The portfolio, Derek scoffed, laughing as he headed for the stairs. You mean your grandmother's bonds that bring in $500 a month? Please, Maddie. Tonight we are talking about billions. Real money. Just look pretty and hold my drink. Madeline watched him walk away. She took a deep breath, looking at herself in the mirror one last time. She touched the fabric of the vintage Halston. Derek saw a $40 rag. He didn't know that she had bought it because she liked the history of it. He didn't know a lot of things. She reached into her jewelry box, not the one on the vanity, but a small, locked, safe in the back of the closet. She pulled out a pair of earrings. They looked like simple glass studs to the untrained eye. In reality, they were flawless. D-color diamonds, 3 carats each, cut by a master jeweler in Antwerp. She put them on. Coming, darling, she whispered to the empty room. The drive to Teterboro was silent. Derek gripped the steering wheel of his leased BMW 5 Series so tight his knuckles were white. He was rehearsing opening lines in his head, mouthing words like synergy, market volatility, and Q3 projections. When they arrived at the private airfield, the sun was just beginning to set, painting the sky in violent streaks of orange and purple. The venue was a massive, pristine hangar owned by Vanderwall Aviation. The hangar doors were open, revealing a glittering party spilling out onto the tarmac, where 3 static aircraft were on display. A Cessna Citation, a Gulfstream G650, and a vintage P-51 Mustang. Valets in white jackets opened the car doors. Derek stepped out, buttoning his jacket, instantly transforming into the charm-oozing corporate climber. He walked around to Madeline's side, not to help her out, but to check his reflection in the car window. Madeline stepped onto the red carpet. The air smelled of expensive cologne and jet fuel, a scent that, oddly, made her shoulders relax. It smelled like home. Stick close, Derek muttered through a fake smile as they approached the check-in desk. And seriously, Maddie, do not embarrass me. They entered the hangar. It was transformed. Crystal chandeliers hung from the industrial steel rafters. Tables were draped in silver linen. A 12-piece jazz band played softly in the corner. The room was populated by men in bespoke suits and women in gowns that cost more than Derek's car. Derek scanned the room, his eyes darting around like a predator seeking prey, or perhaps a scavenger seeking scraps. There he is, Derek whispered. Grant Holloway, VP of Operations for Vanderwall. If I can get 5 minutes with him. He dragged Madeline toward a group of men, standing near the bar. Grant, Derek exclaimed, extending a hand. Derek Calloway, Stratton Oakley. We met briefly at the summit in Chicago. Grant Holloway, a tall, silver-haired man with eyes like flint, looked at Derek with vague recognition. Ah. Yes, Calloway. Good to see you. This is my wife, Madeline, Derek said, gesturing to her with a wave of his hand that suggested she was a piece of furniture he was forced to bring along. Madeline extended a hand. A pleasure, Mr. Holloway. Grant looked at her, his eyes pausing on her dress. For a second, Madeline thought he might recognize the cut, but he simply nodded, charmed. So, Grant, Derek interjected immediately, physically stepping in front of Madeline to block her from the circle. I saw the press release about the merger with Eurostar Logistics. Bold move. I was telling my team just yesterday that the Asian markets are ripe for that kind of disruption. Madeline took a half step back. This was the dance. She was the prop. He was the actor. She watched Derek work the room. He was desperate. It rolled off him in waves. He laughed too loud at jokes that weren't funny. He nodded too eagerly. She looked around the hangar. Her eyes drifted past the people and focused on the aircraft in the background. She studied the Gulfstream G650. She noticed the tail number, N707PW. She smiled slightly. That was Preston Vanderwall's personal jet. She knew because she had outbid him for a slot at Heathrow 3 years ago. You're staring at the plane like you know how to fly it, a voice said. Madeline turned. Standing next to her was a woman in a red sequin dress that was cut dangerously low. It was Chloe, Derek's colleague. She held a martini glass and looked Madeline up and down with a smirk. Hello, Chloe, Madeline said. Madeline. Cute dress, Chloe said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Very rustic. Did you make it? It's vintage, Madeline said politely. Right. Vintage, Chloe laughed. Derek said you were practically Amish. I didn't believe him, but… She gestured vaguely at Madeline's lack of jewelry. You know, this night is important for him. He's up for the senior director role. He needs to look the part. I'm just saying, maybe you should have put in a little more effort for him. Madeline felt a flash of heat in her chest. I am here supporting my husband, Chloe. I don't think my dress changes his quarterly figures. Perception is reality, honey, Chloe said, stepping closer. And right now, the perception is that Derek is a high flyer anchored by a woman who shops at Goodwill. Just a heads up, Preston Vanderwall is here tonight. If Derek doesn't land a conversation with him, he's finished. And looking at you, well, I wouldn't introduce you to Preston either. Chloe winked and walked away, heading straight for Derek, placing a hand on his shoulder and whispering something in his ear. Derek laughed, turning his back fully on Madeline. Madeline stood alone in the middle of the crowded room. She felt the eyes of strangers sliding over her, dismissing her. She was the gray mouse in a room of peacocks. She walked over to the bar. Sparkling water with lime, please, she asked the bartender. 1 second, sweetheart. I'm serving the paying customers, the bartender said dismissively, looking past her to a man waving $100 bill. Madeline stiffened. It was happening everywhere. The subtle disrespect, the assumption that she was nobody. She took her water eventually and drifted toward the open hangar doors, needing fresh air. The tarmac was cooler. She walked toward the velvet rope separating the party from the active runway. She looked up at the night sky. She checked her watch, a small, battered leather thing that Derek hated. It was actually a vintage Patek Philippe from 1952, a gift from her late grandfather. But to Derek, it was just old junk. Sekis. On Besh PM. She closed her eyes. He should be entering the airspace now, she thought. What are you doing out here? Derek's voice was sharp. He had followed her out. He looked furious. I needed air, Madeline said. You're hiding, Derek accused. I looked around and you were gone. Do you know how bad that looks? I'm trying to get 5 minutes with Vanderwall, and my wife is wandering around the runway like a lost child. I wasn't wandering, Derek. I was looking at the planes. The planes? What do you know about planes, Maddie? You get airsick on a commercial flight to Florida. That was food poisoning, Derek. And it was 5 years ago. Whatever, Derek snapped. He grabbed her arm again, harder this time. Listen to me. Preston Vanderwall is coming out to make a speech in 10 minutes. I need you standing next to me, smiling, and looking like you adore me. And for the love of God, tuck that stray hair behind your ear. You look a mess. He reached out and roughly brushed a strand of hair from her face. It wasn't affectionate. It was corrective. Like fixing a crooked tie. Stop it, Madeline said, pulling back. Don't touch me like that. Derek's eyes narrowed. The alcohol he'd consumed on an empty stomach was starting to show. Excuse me? I pay for the house you live in. I pay for the food you eat. I pay for the very clothes on your back, even if they are garbage. You don't tell me what to do. You exist in this world because I allow you to. The words hung in the cool night air. Madeline looked at him. Really looked at him. She saw the fear behind his eyes, the insecurity masked as dominance. But for the first time, she didn't feel pity. She felt done. You allow me to? Madeline repeated softly. Yes, Derek sneered. Without me, you're nothing. You're a nobody. Now get inside, before you embarrass me further. No, Madeline said. Derek froze. What did you say? I said no. Madeline straightened her spine. She stood a little taller in her vintage dress. I'm not going back inside with you, Derek. I'm not going to smile at your boss. And I'm certainly not going to let you speak to me like that ever again. Derek laughed. A cruel, barking sound. Oh, this is rich. What are you going to do? Walk home? It's 20 miles to the city. You don't have a car. You don't have money for an Uber. I don't need an Uber, Madeline said, checking her watch again. 8:20 p.m. You're delusional, Derek spat. Go on then. Leave. Walk into the dark. See how far you get without me. He turned to go back inside, assuming she would crumble, follow him, and beg for forgiveness. That was the dynamic. That was the script. But then, a sound ripped through the air. It started as a low rumble, vibrating in the chests of everyone on the tarmac, and quickly grew into a high-pitched whine that drowned out the jazz band inside. Derek stopped and looked up. What is that? The guests from the party began to spill out onto the tarmac, drawn by the noise. Grant Holloway came out. Chloe came out. Even Preston Vanderwall, the man of the hour, stepped out with a glass of scotch in his hand, looking toward the sky. That's a heavy approach, someone muttered. 2 blinding landing lights pierced the darkness above the runway. A massive shape descended, sleek and predatory. It wasn't a small Cessna. It wasn't a mid-sized Lerner jet. It was a beast. The wheels screeched as they touched the tarmac, smoke puffing from the tires. The reverse thrusters roared, a sound of pure, unadulterated power. The aircraft slowed, turning gracefully off the runway and taxiing straight toward the gala hangar. It was a Bombardier Global 7500, the Rolls-Royce of the sky. It was painted a deep, matte midnight blue with a gold stripe running down the fuselage. The crowd murmured. Whose is that? Is that Vanderwall's new toy? No, Vanderwall flies Gulfstream. That's bigger. Derek stood frozen, watching the massive plane taxi closer. The engines whined down as it came to a halt just 50 yards from the red carpet, dwarfing the other planes on display. The door of the jet opened. The automatic stairs unfolded with a hydraulic hiss. Who the hell is crashing the party? Derek muttered, annoyed that his moment with Vanderwall was being upstaged. Madeline took a step forward. Maddie, get back here, Derek hissed. You're too close. She ignored him. She kept walking. 2 pilots in crisp Navy uniforms descended the stairs first. They didn't look like standard charter pilots. They looked like military precision. They stood at the bottom of the stairs, flanking the exit, hands clasped behind their backs. Then, a flight attendant stepped out. She wasn't carrying a tray. She was carrying a long, white cashmere coat. She walked straight past the velvet rope, past the stunned security guards, past the gaping billionaires. She walked straight to Madeline. The crowd went silent. Derek's mouth fell open. The flight attendant bowed her head slightly. Good evening, madame. We made good time from Zurich. Captain Sterling apologizes for the 10-minute delay. There was a headwind over the Atlantic. She held up the cashmere coat. Madeline turned, slipping her arms into it, covering the vintage dress. Thank you, Elena, Madeline said, her voice projecting clearly in the silent tarmac. Is the car ready? Yes, madam. The Rolls-Royce is waiting on the other side of the hangar, but the helicopter is also on standby if you prefer to go straight to the Hamptons estate. Derek stumbled forward. Maddie, what is going on? Who are these people? Madeline turned to look at him. The meek wife was gone. In her place was a woman who stood with the posture of a queen. These people work for me, Derek, she said coolly. Work for you? You clip coupons. You drive a Honda. Derek sputtered, his brain failing to process the reality. Before Madeline could answer, a booming voice came from the crowd. Madeline, Preston Vanderwall, the billionaire CEO Derek had been desperate to meet, pushed through the crowd. He looked shocked, his eyes wide. Preston? Madeline nodded, acknowledging him as an equal, not a superior. I didn't know you were in the country, Preston said, hurrying over, completely ignoring Derek. I saw the tail number M, HRT1. I thought, surely not. We haven't seen you at the board meetings in Geneva for months. Derek felt the blood drain from his face. Board meetings? Geneva? Preston looked at Derek with confusion, then back to Madeline. Madeline, is this the husband? The one you keep? Private? Madeline looked at Derek. She looked at the sweat on his brow, the cheap fear in his eyes. "Not anymore, Preston," she said. The wind on the tarmac seemed to pick up, whipping the hem of Madeline's vintage dress beneath the heavy white cashmere coat. To Derek, the air suddenly felt thin, as if the oxygen had been sucked out of the hangar by the massive engines of the jet sitting 50 yards away. "Not anymore, Preston," Madeline had said. Her voice was calm, devoid of the trembling hesitation Derek had associated with her for the last 5 years. Derek looked between his wife and the billionaire aviation tycoon. His brain was misfiring. "Preston," Derek stammered, trying to regain control of the narrative. "I think there's been a misunderstanding. Madeline she's confused. She's overwhelmed by the event. She has these episodes." He reached for Madeline again, his hand aiming for her shoulder to steer her away, to hide her, to silence her. "Come on, honey. You're making a scene." Before his fingers could graze the wool of her coat, a shadow moved. One of the men who had descended from the jet, a man built like a vending machine, wearing a suit that cost more than Derek's annual bonus, stepped in. He didn't shove Derek. He simply occupied the space where Derek wanted to be. He was an immovable object. "I would advise against touching Miss Hart," the man said. His voice was like gravel grinding in a mixer. "Miss Hart?" Derek laughed, a high-pitched, nervous sound. "Her name is Calloway. Madeline Calloway. She's my wife." "And who are you?" "Her driver?" The security specialist didn't blink. "I am the head of personal security for the Hart Directorate, and you are currently trespassing within the 20-foot perimeter of a principal asset." "Principal asset?" Derek looked around at the crowd. "Is this a joke? Is this some kind of reality TV prank?" He looked to Chloe for support, but Chloe was backing away. She was looking at Madeline with wide, terrified eyes. Chloe knew something Derek didn't. She had put the pieces together the moment the security guard said Hart. Preston Vanderwall stepped closer to Derek, his face grave. He looked at Derek with a mixture of pity and disgust. "Derek," Preston said quietly, "you really don't know, do you?" "Know what?" Derek snapped, his frustration boiling over. "That my wife rented a plane to embarrass me? That she's playing dress-up?" "She didn't rent the plane, you idiot," Preston said, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "That is the flagship of the Hartwell Global Fleet. Madeline isn't just a housewife. She is Madeline Hart, the only granddaughter of Tobias Hart." The name hit Derek like a physical blow to the stomach. Tobias Hart. The shipping magnate. The man who practically built the modern logistics infrastructure of the Eastern Seaboard. Hartwell Global wasn't just a company, it was an empire. They owned shipping lines, pharmaceutical patents, real estate trusts, and, Derek's eyes widened, Stratton Oakley, the firm Derek worked for. The firm he was so desperate to climb. It was a subsidiary of a holding company that was acquired by Hartwell Global 4 years ago. "No," Derek whispered. "That's impossible. She clips coupons. She worries about the electric bill. She drives a 2016 Honda Civic with a dent in the bumper." Madeline turned to him. The lights from the hangar reflected in her hazel eyes, which were now hard as diamonds. "I drive a Honda because I wanted to live a simple life, Derek," she said. "I wanted to be loved for who I was, not for what I could buy. I wanted to know that the man holding my hand wasn't counting the rings on my fingers." She took a step closer to him, the cashmere coat flowing around her. "When I met you," she continued, her voice gaining strength, "I thought I found that. You were ambitious, yes, but you were kind. You listened, but then, the higher you climbed, the smaller you wanted me to be. You didn't want a partner, you wanted a prop. And you treated me like a burden because you thought I had nothing to offer you. I was stressed," Derek stammered, sweat pouring down his face despite the cold. "Maddie, baby, it's the pressure. You know how it is. I did it for us, for our future. You did it for yourself," Madeline corrected. "And tonight? Tonight wasn't stress. Tonight was cruelty. You humiliated me to impress strangers. You told me I was nothing without you." She gestured to the massive jet behind her, its engines humming a low, powerful note. You are wrong, Derek. I'm not nothing. I'm the board of directors. The silence that followed was deafening. The jazz band inside had stopped playing. The waiters had stopped serving. Every eye was on Derek Calloway, the man who had just told the owner of his company that she looked like a maid. Derek felt the ground shifting. He pivoted to Preston Vanderwall. Preston, sir, look. Marriage is complicated. We have our ups and downs. This is just a spat, a domestic dispute. It shouldn't affect my standing at the firm. My numbers are solid. My Q3 projections are. Preston raised a hand, cutting him off. Derek, stop. Just stop. You are embarrassing yourself. I can fix this. Derek insisted, his narcissism fighting a losing battle with reality. He turned back to Madeline. Maddie, look at the plane. It's amazing. You kept it a secret? That's fine. That's exciting. We can work with this. Imagine the power couple we could be. Me at the helm of Stratton Oakley. You managing the family trust. We can rule this city. He took a step forward, a gruesome smile plastered on his face. Get in the car, honey. Let's go home and talk about this. I'll make you that pasta you like. Madeline looked at him with profound sadness. It was the look one gives to a dying animal. I'm not going home to that house, Derek. I bought it, by the way. The mortgage payments you thought you were making? They were going into a savings account in your name. I paid for the house in cash 5 years ago through a shell company. Derek's jaw dropped. What? And I'm not getting in your car, she said. She turned toward the jet. I have a meeting in London in the morning. You can't just leave, Derek screamed, his facade cracking completely. I am your husband. You can't walk away from me. He lunged. It was a desperate, foolish move. He tried to grab the sleeve of her coat. The security specialist moved with terrifying speed. One moment Derek was reaching out. The next, he was face down on the tarmac. His arm twisted behind his back at a painful angle. The taste of jet fuel and asphalt in his mouth. I said, the guard grunted, leaning his weight onto Derek's shoulder. Do not touch the principal. Let him go, Thomas, Madeline said softly. The guard hesitated, then released Derek. Derek scrambled to his feet, dusting off his tuxedo, his face bright red. He looked around. People were filming. Phones were out. The flashing lights of cameras were blinding. Madeline stood at the bottom of the air stairs. She looked back one last time. You wanted to be a big man, Derek, she said. You wanted to be important. Well, now you are. You're going to be the only topic of conversation in New York tomorrow morning. Enjoy the spotlight. She turned and ascended the stairs. The flight attendant, a woman named Simone, waited at the top. Madeline stepped inside the cabin. The heavy door of the Global 7500 swung shut. The lock engaged with a solid, mechanical thunk. Derek stood alone on the tarmac as the engines roared to life, blasting him with hot air, blowing his hair into a chaotic mess. The plane taxied away, turning toward the runway. Maddie, he screamed over the roar of the turbines. Maddie, come back! But the jet didn't stop. It accelerated, lifting effortlessly into the night sky, its lights blinking a rhythmic goodbye as it banked east, toward Europe, leaving Derek Calloway grounded in every sense of the word. The interior of the Bombardier Global 7500 was a sanctuary of silence and cream leather. As soon as the door sealed, the noise of the outside world, the wind, the engines, Derek's screaming vanished, replaced by the soft hum of the pressurized cabin. Madeline leaned back against the bulkhead door for a moment, closing her eyes. Her chest heaved. The adrenaline that had sustained her through the confrontation was draining away, leaving her trembling. Madame? Simone, the flight attendant, stood nearby with a silver tray. On it was a steaming towel and a glass of vintage Krug champagne. Are you all right? Madeline opened her eyes and exhaled a long, shaky breath. She took the warm towel and pressed it against her face, wiping away the grime of the city and the invisible film of Derek's judgment. I am relieved, Simone, and I am tired. We have the bed made up in the stateroom, Simone said gently. And Mr. Sterling is on the secure line in the conference area. Thank you. Madeline walked through the main cabin. It was deeper and wider than most commercial airliners. To her left was a dining area with a table set for 4. To her right, a divan covered in Hermes blankets. She walked past them to the mid-cabin conference room. A large monitor was mounted on the wall. On the screen was the face of an older man with wire-rimmed glasses and a hairline that had receded decades ago. It was Arthur Sterling, the family's longtime lawyer and the executor of the Hart Trust. "Madeline," Arthur said, his voice tinny through the speakers but filled with warmth. "We saw the takeoff clearance. You're airborne?" "I am," Madeline said, sinking into one of the swivel seats. She kicked off her heels, cheap pumps she had bought to match the budget she pretended to be on, and curled her legs under her. "It's done, Arthur. How did he take it?" "About as well as you'd expect," Madeline said, looking out the window as the lights of New York City faded into a glittering grid below. "He tried to claim credit for my success before he even understood what it was. Then he tried to claim ownership of me." "Typical," Arthur grunted. "The man is a spreadsheet with an ego." "Is the paperwork ready?" Madeline asked. "Filed 5 minutes ago," Arthur confirmed. "We initiated Protocol 0. All joint accounts have been frozen well, the ones he knew about. The house has been secured. I have a team changing the locks as we speak. His access to the credit cards you supplemented has been revoked." Madeline felt a pang of guilt. It was hard to unlearn 5 years of loyalty, even misplaced loyalty. "He has his own salary, Arthur. We don't need to leave him destitute." "His salary?" Arthur chuckled dryly. "Madeline, have you looked at his financials lately? The man spends 110% of what he earns, trying to look like he earns 300%. He's leveraged to the hilt on that BMW and his investments in crypto. Without your quiet infusions into the household account, he defaults on his car in 30 days. Madeline rubbed her temples. "I tried to tell him. I tried to teach him about fiscal responsibility. He just called me cheap." "He called you cheap because he couldn't control you," Arthur said firmly. "Listen to me, Maddie. You gave him 5 years. You gave him a chance to love the woman, not the wallet. He failed the test. Don't let him keep the answer sheet." Madeline nodded slowly. "You're right. What about the firm? Stratton Oakley?" Arthur adjusted his glasses. "I've already spoken to the board. They are displeased. Apparently, the scene at the gala is already trending on Twitter. Someone live-streamed the landing. The headline is, 'Mystery Billionaire Dumps Husband at Vanderwall Gala.' It's viral." Madeline groaned, covering her face with her hands. "I didn't want a spectacle. I just wanted to leave." "You landed a $65 million jet at a party where people measure status by the inch," Arthur said. "Spectacle was inevitable. But don't worry, the PR team is spinning it. You're the empowered Harris. Derek is the dead weight. The narrative is in our favor. And Derek's job? That," Arthur said with a grim smile, "is a matter for tomorrow morning. I believe he has a 9 a.m. meeting with Human Resources. They don't know who you are yet, not fully, but they know Derek caused a scene at a client event. That's enough for a conduct unbecoming termination. Don't fire him." "Arthur," Madeline said suddenly. Arthur paused. "Excuse me? Don't fire him," she repeated. She stood up and walked to the window, watching the dark Atlantic Ocean approaching beneath them. "If you fire him, he becomes a victim. He'll go on podcasts. He'll write a book about how the powerful elite crushed the little guy. He loves to be the victim. Then what do you propose?" Madeline's reflection in the window showed a woman who was done hiding. A small, cold smile touched her lips. "Keep him," she said, "but move his desk." "Move his desk?" "Stratton Oakley manages the logistics for our waste management division, don't they?" "They do." "Transfer him," Madeline said. "He wants to be a director? Let him be the director of sanitation logistics in the basement archives. Let him keep his job, but strip him of the clients, the bonuses, and the window office. Let him quit. Let him realize that without me, he isn't climbing the ladder, he's holding it." Arthur laughed. It was a genuine, delighted sound. "Remind me never to cross you, Madeline." "It shall be done. Get some sleep, Arthur." I'll see you in London. Good night, Miss Hart. The screen went black. Madeline stood up and walked to the rear of the plane, into the master bedroom. It was outfitted with a queen-sized bed, Egyptian cotton sheets, and a small vanity. She sat at the vanity and looked at herself. She began to unpin her hair. The severe bun fell away, her chestnut waves cascading down her shoulders. She took a wet wipe and scrubbed her face harder this time. She reached for the zipper of the vintage Halston dress. She pulled it down and let the dress fall to the floor. For a moment, she looked at the heap of blue fabric. It was a beautiful dress. She had loved it, but Derek had tainted it. She kicked it aside and opened the wardrobe built into the plane's wall. Inside hung rows of clothes that fit her real life. Silk blouses, tailored power suits, cashmere sweaters. She put on a simple silk robe and climbed into the bed. The plane hit a patch of turbulence, rocking gently. Usually, Madeline was a nervous flyer. Tonight, she felt safer at 40,000 feet than she had ever felt in the colonial house in the suburbs. She pulled the duvet up to her chin. She didn't cry. She had cried enough over the last 2 years in the shower, so Derek wouldn't hear. Tonight, her eyes were dry. She fell asleep to the sound of the engines carrying her away from the man who thought she was nothing. The sun rose over New Jersey with a cheerful, oblivious brightness that Derek Calloway found personally offensive. He woke up on the couch. He had driven home from the gala in a daze, stopping only to buy a bottle of cheap whiskey at a gas station, which he had consumed 3/4 of before passing out in his tuxedo. His head felt like it was being split open with a dull axe. His mouth tasted like copper and regret. "Maddie?" he croaked, sitting up. The house was silent. "Maddie, stop playing games," he shouted, wincing at the volume of his own voice. He stumbled into the kitchen. Usually, at this hour 7 a.m., there would be coffee brewing. There would be the smell of toast. Madeline would be sitting at the island, reviewing the grocery budget or reading a book. The kitchen was spotless, cold, empty. On the counter, where his coffee mug usually sat, was a small white envelope. Derek grabbed it, tearing it open with shaking hands. Inside was a single key and a note. "This is the key to the Honda. You'll need it. The lease on the BMW is in my name, and I've canceled the insurance as of midnight. M." "You can't do that," Derek yelled at the empty room. "I'm your husband. It's community property." He ran to the garage. The BMW 5 Series was there. He tried the door handle. Locked. He pressed the unlock button on his fob. Nothing. He peered through the window. The dashboard was dark. She hadn't just canceled the insurance. She had bricked the car remotely. The connected drive account was linked to her email. Damn it. Derek kicked the tire, hurting his toe. He looked at the Honda Civic in the driveway, the loser cruiser he had mocked her for. It was the only way he was getting to work. "Fine," he spat. "Fine. I'll drive the piece of junk. I'll fix this. I'll go to the office. I'll talk to the partners. I'll explain that my wife is having a mental breakdown." He showered quickly, shaving with a trembling hand, nicking his chin. He put on his best suit, a charcoal pinstripe that he thought made him look like a Wall Street shark. He practiced his smile in the mirror. It looked manic. He drove the Honda to the city. The suspension was soft, the engine lacked power, and the AC rattled. Derek seethed the entire way. "She thinks this is a power move?" he thought. "She thinks she can teach me a lesson? Wait until she realizes she needs me to manage that fortune. She doesn't know the first thing about finance. She probably thinks a hedge fund is something for gardening." He arrived at the Stratton Oakley building in Midtown Manhattan at 8:45 a.m. He walked into the lobby, swiping his badge at the turnstile. Beep beep. Red light. Access denied. Derek frowned. He swiped again. Beep beep. "Hey, Jerry," Derek called out to the security guard at the desk. "Badge is acting up." "Buzz me in?" Jerry, a man Derek had walked past for 6 years without ever learning his last name, looked down at his screen, then up at Derek. There was no friendly nod today. "I can't do that, Mr. Calloway. You need to wait here. HR is coming down." "HR?" Derek scoffed. "Jerry, I'm a director. I don't wait for HR. Just open the gate. I can't, sir. Your clearance has been flagged. People were starting to pile up behind Derek. Junior analysts, secretaries, interns, they were whispering, "Is that him? The guy from the video? Oh my God, it is. He looks terrible." Derek spun around. "Do you mind? I'm trying to work here." The elevator doors opened, and a woman stepped out. It was Brenda from HR. Usually, Brenda was smiling, organizing birthday cakes. Today, she held a clipboard like a shield. Flanking her were two large men in blazers. "Derek," Brenda said, her voice tight, "please come with us." Finally, Derek said, straightening his tie. "Brenda, this is ridiculous. My badge is broken, and Jerry is being a tin-pot dictator. I have a 9:30 with the Asian markets team." "You don't have a 9:30, Derek," Brenda said softly. "Please, just come to the conference room." They led him not to the elevators, but to a small glass-walled meeting room off the lobby. It was the fishbowl, the room where people were fired. Everyone in the lobby could see in. Derek sat down. "Okay, Brenda. What is this? Did Vanderwall call?" "Look, the thing at the gala was a misunderstanding. My wife is eccentric. She has resources I wasn't aware of, and she staged a stunt." Brenda placed a document on the table. "Derek, we've received instructions from the parent company regarding your employment." "Parent company?" Derek frowned. "You mean the holding group? Why would they care about a director-level dispute?" "Because..." A new voice entered the room. The door opened. It wasn't a lawyer. It wasn't his boss. It was Grant Holloway, the VP from Vanderwall Aviation. The man Derek had tried to impress the night before. But he wasn't wearing his aviation pin. He was wearing a lapel pin with a stylized H. "Grant?" Derek asked, confused. "What are you doing here?" "I'm not just with Vanderwall, Derek," Grant said, sitting down opposite him. "I sit on the board of Hartwell Global. I'm Madeline's liaison for North American operations." Derek went pale. "Madeline sent you?" "Madeline is over the Atlantic right now," Grant said coldly. "She doesn't have time for this. But she did give us specific instructions." "Okay. Look," Derek leaned forward, trying to activate his charm. "Grant, man to man, you saw what happened. She blindsided me. If I had known she was a heart, things would have been different. I can be an asset to the family. I know the markets. I can manage her portfolio better than whatever dinosaur she has doing it now." Grant stared at him. It was a look of pure disbelief. "You think this is a job interview? Derek, you publicly insulted the chairwoman of the board." "She's my wife." "She's your landlord," Grant corrected, "and your employer. And she is currently the only reason you aren't being escorted out by the police for fraud." "Fraud?" Derek squeaked. Grant slid a file across the table. "We audited your expense reports this morning. The client dinners that were actually dates with a Miss Chloe Evans, the travel expenses for trips to Atlantic City, it totals $40,000, Derek. That's corporate theft." Derek felt the room spin. "Everyone does it. It's padding. It's standard practice. It's a felony," Grant said. "Usually, we would prosecute. We would destroy you. But Madeline, for reasons I cannot fathom, has requested mercy." Derek let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. "Thank God. She still loves me." "I knew it. She wants me to come to London, doesn't she? To fix this?" Grant laughed. It was a dark, hollow sound. "No, Derek. She doesn't want to see you. She wants you to work." "Work? We aren't firing you," Brenda interjected, looking uncomfortable. "But your role as director of strategy is no longer available." "Then what am I doing?" "We have a vacancy in the records and retention department," Grant said. "It's in the sub-basement. It involves categorizing physical files from the 1980s and 90s that need to be digitized. It pays significantly less. Minimum wage, actually. Plus benefits, of course." "You're demoting me to a clerk?" Derek stood up, his face purple. "I have an MBA. I generated $3 million in revenue last year. You generated lawsuits and bad PR, Grant said, not moving. Those are your options, Derek. Option A. You accept the demotion, you keep your health insurance, and you pay back the stolen $40,000 via a garnishment of your wages over the next, let's say, 10 years. Option B. We fire you for cause. We press charges for the embezzlement, and you go to prison. Derek looked at the glass walls. His colleagues were watching. Chloe was standing by the elevators, talking to someone, laughing. She wasn't looking at him. She had already moved on. He looked at Grant. This is humiliation. No, Grant said, standing up and buttoning his jacket. Last night was humiliation. This is consequences. Grant turned to leave. Oh, and Derek? The Honda. Madeline says you can keep it, but she wants the spare key back. You tend to lose things. Grant walked out. Derek sat alone in the fishbowl. He looked at his reflection in the glass. He didn't look like a king anymore. He looked like a man who had been handed a lottery ticket and used it to light a cigarette. He looked at Brenda. Where is the basement? He whispered. The basement of Stratton Oakley smelled of wet cardboard and despair. Derek's new title, Director of Sanitation Logistics, was a cruel joke for a man whose job was now scanning 40 years of waste manifests. His office was a wire cage in the sub-basement, his view a safety poster from 2004. Hey, Calloway, the maintenance supervisor barked, throwing a wrench on Derek's desk. Shredder on the 3rd floor is jammed again. Fix it. Derek trudged upstairs, his toolbox heavy in hand. The trading floor was exactly as he left it, loud, energetic, smelling of money. But he wasn't part of it anymore. He walked past his old glass-walled office and froze. Sitting in his chair was Chloe. She looked sharper, wealthier. Excuse me, she said, without looking up. The machine is over there. Try not to make a mess. I have clients coming in at 2. She had taken his job. She didn't even sneer. She just dismissed him like the help. Derek knelt on the expensive carpet, grease staining his hands, while the woman he'd tried to impress stepped over him to close a deal. The final blow came 3 days later. Arthur Sterling, Madeline's lawyer, descended into the basement holding a thick binder. The divorce is non-negotiable, Arthur said, dropping the file on the wobbly desk. The house belongs to the trust. The accounts are frozen. You have 48 hours to vacate. I have nothing, Derek shouted. You have the Honda, Arthur replied coldly, adjusting his glasses, though I believe the transmission is failing. Good luck, Mr. Calloway. That night, Derek packed his life into black garbage bags. He drove the rattling Civic to a cheap motel in Jersey City. He checked Instagram and saw a photo of Madeline in Paris, looking radiant and free. He lay back on the stained mattress, the silence of the room deafening. The king of finance was now just a man with a broken car and a mountain of regret. 2 years later, the biting wind of JFK's tarmac stung Derek's face. He wasn't a director anymore. He was a ground marshaller in a neon orange vest, wielding glowing batons to guide titans of industry to their gates. His world was now measured in noise, exhaust fumes, and minimum wage. Bring her in on. Stand for, Calloway. His supervisor crackled over the radio. A massive Global 7500 turned off the taxiway. Derek froze. He knew that midnight blue livery. He knew the tail number, HRT1. It was her. Panic clawed at his throat. He wanted to run, to hide his thinning hair and grime-streaked face, but he couldn't abandon his post. He stood rigid, guiding the beast to a halt. As the engines whined down, the stairs lowered. A man stepped out first, rugged, kind, wearing a simple t-shirt. Then came Madeline. She looked radiant, her hair cut in a chic bob, laughing at something the man said. She looked lighter, unburdened by the anchor Derek had been. She paused at the bottom of the stairs, her gaze sweeping the tarmac. Derek braced himself. He straightened his spine, waiting for the anger, the pity, or even a smirk of victory. He needed her to see him, to acknowledge that he still existed in her world. Her eyes landed on him. For a split second, they locked. And then, she looked right through him. There was no recognition. To her, he wasn't a villain or a regret. He was just part of the airport infrastructure, as invisible as a runway light. She turned back to her partner, smiling, and ducked into the waiting SUV. As the car sped away, leaving Derek standing in the jet wash, the crushing truth settled in. He hadn't been destroyed by her hatred. He had been erased by her indifference. He was finally, truly, nobody. And there you have it. Derek thought he held all the cards, but he forgot that the person holding the deck decides the game. He spent his life chasing status, only to realize that true worth isn't about the title on your business card or the price of your suit. It's about how you treat the people who stand beside you when you have nothing. Madeline didn't just leave him, she outgrew him. She showed us that the best revenge isn't anger, and it isn't cruelty. The best revenge is simply moving on, and being so happy that the past becomes invisible. What do you think? Did Derek deserve his fate in the basement, or was Madeline too harsh? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of karma and redemption, please smash that like button, share this with a friend who needs a reminder of their worth, and subscribe to the channel for more stories that hit deep. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.